been a while since I did a video, but I want to ask a question. What is limited atonement or particular redemption's fatal flaw? It's one that's kind of has occurred to me over the last few years after thinking about it and seeing it, and figured I'd share since it's just kind of driven me nuts this week due to an interaction with someone. But what is it? What is its fatal flaw? To the Calvinists out there, hear me out. To the Arminians out there, hear me out. To my Calvinist brothers, see if you can relate to this kind of a conversation. You run into one of your Arminian brothers, and a discussion about limited atonement comes up. The Arminian states that Christ died for all men. The Calvinist asks, what do you mean by that? Do you mean all men without exception or all men without distinction? The Arminian says, well, all means all, and that's all is ever going to mean. Same for world. World means world, and that is all world is ever going to mean. Or discussion of Romans 8 comes up, and the subject of foreknowledge, and Romans in the verses from 29 and 30. And you bring up, the Calvinist brings up the grammar. What's the subject? What's the verb? What's the direct object? Who's the one doing the actions here? The Arminian replies, well, I don't need a dictionary to know what foreknowledge is. Everybody knows what foreknowledge is. You just, want to twist things. Or the subject of draw comes up in John's Gospel. And you bring up the use of the Greek word helkuo in the New Testament and its semantic domain. He responds with, well, I believe the Bible, and draw doesn't mean drag, and I believe the Bible, and that's all I'm going to believe, not some doctrine created by a Presbyterian some years ago. Does that sound familiar to you? Every one of those I've encountered over the years. I think every Calvinist can relate to that. So I ask again, what is limited atonements or particular redemption? What is its fatal flaw? The fatal flaw is this, that in those discussions I've had over the years, and well, almost every one of them, on a routine basis, at least a couple times a week, that subject of limited atonement comes up. And inevitably, I have difficulty interacting with the person, with the Arminian, because the Arminian simply doesn't know the issue. He doesn't understand what Christ's high priestly work is, his intercession. He doesn't understand about the types. And when those things are brought up, they're usually ignored. When certain exegesis of texts is brought up, like Romans 8, 29 and 30, and the grammar, for example, and you bring up the grammar of other passages, like in Hebrews, it's ignored. Because unfortunately, the modern Arminian just doesn't have the biblical knowledge to be able to have a discussion. Whether it's laziness or doesn't understand it, it is, in all honesty, in my opinion, from listening to many Arminians over the years, and I'm speaking specifically of pastors quite often, or teachers that I've heard, like in Ed Young Jr. recently. Well, I know the theology, but then what he says indicates he doesn't. That they, and it's my experience being an Arminian over the years, attending an Arminian seminary, you read what other Arminians have to say about Calvinists. You usually don't read Calvinists. Let's be honest, we usually don't represent our opponents accurately. But that's the problem. That when I'm having the discussion, the Arminian usually responds with John 3:16, 2 Peter 3:9, or 1 Timothy 2:4. And it doesn't go any further than that. And when you bring up the issues of like propitiation in 1 John 2:2, or things like that, the discussion usually ends. And if I do feel the need, like in 1 Timothy chapter 2, to go in the idea of mediator, well, that's where the discussion's going to end, because he doesn't know about that. He's got some superficial knowledge, but he really doesn't understand it. And it ends there. The discussion can't go any further. I mean, unfortunately, like I attended for many years, most of the Arminians I encounter attend a lot of churches I attend. And it doesn't get any further. You're lucky if you hear repentance taught, much less the book of Hebrews and the types. I've never heard an Arminian pastor or teacher get into the book of Hebrews and really explain the arguments contained therein about the perfecting work of Christ. But, as I said, that's the problem. The discussion's going to end because the person I'm interacting with doesn't know the issues. When I get into discussion with someone on limited atonement, and if the first thing they bring up is John 3:16, or 1 Timothy 2:4, or 1 John 2:2, or I just blank, 2 Peter 3:9, I know that it's a safe bet this person doesn't know the issues. And the discussion's not going to go any further than those passages. It's not going to deal with the real issues involved when it comes to limited atonement. What's limited atonement's fatal flaw? Unfortunately, ignorance. Whether it be willful or laziness, I don't know. But that's the problem. Just some thoughts. Take care. Oh, well, real quick. You know what? I'll go ahead and end instead. I wasn't going to, but it's such a good quote, I think I will. I'll end with this quote from Charles Spurgeon that I got from my readings today, because I think it's rather relevant. I don't usually end my videos with quotes, but I wanted to. So take care. Enjoy this quote from Mr. Spurgeon.